Hey, Elisa, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I want to get your advice later on what kind of apple pie you're making for Thanksgiving. But before we get to that, so last week we were at the IAB Privacy Summit, which was awesome. And then Paul Singer, one of your partners at Kelly Dry, had Michelle Lucan, which is the data privacy chief at the Connecticut AG, super illuminating panel. I wanted to talk about what she said. Firstly, she's reading the privacy policies.
Oh, yeah. And that's something we've told clients, there's so many things you have to do, of course, but you got to take it step by step. And first things, what's publicly facing, right? What is the most obvious way that a regulator could take a look at what you're doing without you knowing to see if you've just even met the minimum standard? And all of these state privacy laws require you disclose certain things in your privacy policy, that you extend certain rights and you talk about them. So what we heard from Michelle is they're looking at privacy policies. Shocker, because it's available and they can see when you have a last updated date of 2017, that's probably an indicator that you've not taken the steps.
I thought the FTC were the ones who were all about deceptive conduct and right, like it's one of the weapons that they have. But no, the states have these UDAP rules as well, right? And they go after deceptive conduct in a very similar way.
Right. So every state has what we'll call a mini FTC Act, and unfair and deceptive trade practices. Some of them don't have the unfairness. But what we heard from Michelle is the states are talking. They're talking every month. There are privacy stakeholders among these different states that are discussing what they're seeing. And what she said was, even for those states that don't have these new comprehensive privacy laws, they've all got these mini FTC acts and the states are talking, right? It's a pooled resources in terms of what companies out there are doing things that may be deceptive or unfair. She pointed to those examples, right? Are you saying or not saying really important things that might be a deceptive prong? Are you doing things with data that may really amount to an unfairness claim? She did not mince words on that front.
I feel like we've been talking about this for years, this idea that people make privacy choices, you should enforce those across your data systems, right? Michelle talked about it as well. She said, look, I understand it might be technically challenging, but she also said there's no excuse for that because there's tools out there that solve for this.
There was a little nuance to the way she said it. She's going to listen to your story, right? Let's say you are the target of an investigation. You're going to put forward some kind of defense. And so if your defense is, we just couldn't understand the technical things, whoops, sorry, our bad, that kind of defense is not going to be received well. If you are showing you were thoughtful, you had the right team, you were putting together an infrastructure to address the compliance, and maybe it didn't kind of stitch all together perfectly, that is probably going to land better than it's hard or it costs a lot of money to figure out what we need to do to comply.
Tying it back to the privacy policy, hey, you're saying it's hard, but you haven't updated it since 2017. So right. Is it hard or you just not, or do you just not care about it? She talked about how consumers are so overwhelmed and that the notices aren't clear and conspicuous enough. She says, write your privacy policy in a way that you would like to see them, right? She's talking to a lot of marketers and brands and asking them about their data policies. And she had two interesting questions. Hey, why are you holding this much data? And why are you holding it for so long? Right. Two pretty simple questions. And brands were like, well, shoulder shrugs. I don't know, everyone's doing it.
If you want to have some preview of where Connecticut and probably the other states are going to go when it comes to enforcement, the data security enforcements by the states are a pretty good indication. And so she pointed to past big mega breaches where the states, and often in a multi-state, took a really aggressive enforcement on that because they said that data breach was so massive. It involved so much data. And you didn't really have a good enough business reason to retain all of that data, right? You were just hoarding data for the sake of it. And she was pointing to that by way of example. On the privacy side, we've talked about data minimization for a long time. I think they are going to have a much finer point on, do you have a legitimate basis for retaining the kind of data that you have? Can you prove that that matches to your privacy policy, that there's a business reason why you were retaining it for that length of time and how it's being commercially used? I think companies are just going to be a little bit on their heels to be able to describe why they're doing it. And in the US, we don't have ROPAs the way that you have with GDPR. It's almost by implication that you are, as you're building your privacy program, you're being very thoughtful about knowing what data you have and how you use it. And I think what we're going to see from regulators is you're going to have to demonstrate that good faith. And I think her point about the overwhelmed consumers, I mean, regulators and state attorneys general in particular, they're often guided by, of course, priority areas by the attorney general in office, but also by consumer complaints. And if you have consumer complaints that they're trying to exercise these new privacy rights and they're not able to, that's going to be a concern. And I think when you look at privacy policies, a lot of these have been bolt-on messes over a year where you add a new paragraph here and you add a new paragraph there, either death by 1,000 cuts or too many cooks in the kitchen. And it all doesn't quite read together, right? You've got some of this old-fashioned language on maybe practices before the new privacy laws. And I think just a layman's perspective, it might not make sense, or it might not be presented in a way that's just easy for the eyes to skim and digest and find what are the parts that are relevant. And I think what we heard from Michelle is take a fresh look at your privacy policy. Is it user-friendly? Can somebody find it to begin with? Can somebody identify in that privacy policy easily where you are describing their privacy rights? And if they were to follow the instructions you put in your privacy policy, does that work? Very common sense. And you would be surprised that does not always work out.
I love how common sense she was.
There was some controversy because there was a question about measurement, frequency capping, kind of common things that I think the industry is wrestling with and saying, well, we need that. That's like an anti-fraud measure in a lot of ways. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't apply opt-outs to those things. And she answered that in the way that was like a lawyer would answer it, right? I'm going to look at the statute. I'm going to do statutory interpretation. Is there a carve out? No? Okay, then, and so like there's not an automatic, you say the magic words measurement and frequency capping, and therefore you don't even have to do any legal analysis. No, there was nuance in the fact that like you have the burden of proof. You need to demonstrate, right? We've seen lots of versions of measurement that are like combined with optimization and retargeting, right? It's all together. And I think companies really do have to parse that out. And some of the solutions may have to adjust if you truly want to put it in a service provider capacity. And that was what she was saying. It's not all together in one side or all together in the other. You have the burden of proof and you got to get real granular.
Gotcha. I love that, at least. And it looks like in February, she's going to come out with her enforcement report or update at least.
Correct. I wouldn't anticipate a ton of actual enforcement activity. I think there's more like frauds, but she also pointed out that there are FAQs on Connecticut Attorney General's website about the different components of the privacy law. It does not hurt to develop a relationship with the Attorney General's office, not just when you're a target of an investigation.
All right, so final question, Elisa. So Thanksgiving tomorrow, what's the deal with the apple pie? Like Granny Smith, others, like what's in the mix there?
I'm a little obsessive when it comes to baking apple pies. Everybody has their own way. So I am an all butter crust. I definitely do the homemade crust. It's got to be par baked. And then when it comes to the apples, I think if you do all Granny Smith, the flavor isn't quite there in the texture. So I like to do a combo. I like to do the half Granny Smith and then half. Sometimes it's Honeycrisp, sometimes it's Gala. Depends. Every year it's slightly different. And then we have a lot of fun designing the crust, right? Coming up with some type of fun design for the top. What about you? Apple pie, right?
I'm the one asking the questions around it. No, you've inspired me. I'm doing an apple pie. I used to be 100% Granny Smith. I'm going to throw some Honeycrisp in the mix there. And on top for us, it's a lattice work. Well, not quite the bread, but the lattice work and of course sugar on top just to give it that crunch.
So if you're going to do lattice work, consider on some of the stripes across making that a braided stripe. Like, right, take it really thin and have like a couple of those. It's too much.
I'll try it. I'll let you know how it goes. I'm with you. All right, Lisa, thanks as always, and enjoy the holiday.